The first blessing of the Amidah concludes Moged Avram. God is the shield of Abraham, the protector of Abraham. What about Yitzchak? Why wasn't he the protector of Yitzchak? Or the protector of Yaakov? Yaakov had many moments in his life that if not for God's protection, he wouldn't have survived. His confrontation with Esav after not seeing him for 36 years. And he thought he may be killed. And at the last moment, Esav's wrath was diffused. As it says, Yaakov bowed 7 times, approaches him, and they embrace, and Esav cries. Of course, Yaakov had humbled himself before Esav. But Esav initially was coming with 400 men, all-out battle to kill Yaakov and his family, destroy them. God is Moged Yaakov. He's the protector of Yaakov. Yitzchak, he had many times when he became very wealthy in the famine years. And the Philistine king asked him, please leave the community. Or he had originally maybe considered taking his wife. He could have killed him. For Rivka, but yet Hashem protected him. It was not. So why is it only Moged Avraham? Even to be shielded from certain challenges which are beyond our ability, that's also Mogen. He's Mogen Avraham. Every morning in the blessings of the morning, we conclude Hagomel Chasodim Tovim Lamo Yisrael. God does acts of righteousness or living kindness with his people Israel. Baruch Hashem Gomel Chasodim Lamo Yisrael. But in that paragraph, we supplicate Hashem. He shouldn't bring us lowly day nisayon, lowly day vizayon. We ask God, don't bring us to a state to be tested, to be challenged, and not to a state of being disgraced. So we ask you 2 things. He should protect us from challenges, because you never know whether you're going to be able to sustain the challenge, and also not to be disgraced. There are many moments in life where we could be disgraced to a point, and due to that disgrace, besides the pain of being disgraced, we're discredited. And we ask God not to bring us to that situation. So if that's the case, when we speak of Mogen, God is a protector. He shields us. He shields us from many things. So why is it only Mogen Avraham and not Mogen Yitzchak and Mogen Yaakov? And Rashi, at the beginning of Lech Lecha, which is the test to leave his homeland, his birthplace, his family, to go to this unknown location, which God will show him, and ultimately reveal to him. It's alluded there that in the first blessing of the Amidah, you would think you would conclude with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, mention all 3 patriarchs, because they are the 3 individuals of the foundation of the Jewish people. Vayeh Barocha, you will be the blessing. And Rashi in his commentary cites the Midrash. What does it mean, you will be the blessing? When we conclude the blessing, everything is attributed to you. There's not going to be any mention of Yitzchak and Yaakov. Now, there's an expression, we're midgets on the backs of giants. You don't hear that kind of expression today any longer. There used to be an expression, you got to put your shoulder to the wheel. That used to be an expression meaning to really apply yourself. We are midgets on the backs of giants. What does that mean? Meaning, many things which we have discoveries today, it's only based on previous discoveries, and since we have certain understandings prior to this level, it took us to a new level of understanding. But if we would have started at the very elementary state, you could have never come to understand what you understand today. So everything is a progression and an advancement And due to this new level of understanding, based on something from before, therefore I understand what I understand now. Of the three patriarchs, who was the most special of the patriarchs? Yaakov. Yaakov was the most special of the patriarchs. He himself fathered 12 sons, which is they are the infrastructure, spiritual infrastructure of the Jewish people. All his children were devoutly righteous, more than that, special. David refers to them as Shiftei Koch. They're the tribes of God. However, if Yaakov wouldn't been predicated on 2 generations by Avram introducing God to the world, that continuum, the trajectory in an upwards direction would have never happened. It's true. Yaakov took what he had prior to him, 2 generations of mentoring, and took it to another level. But if those generations didn't precede him, Yaakov would have remained clueless, not understanding where it begins and where it ends. There's a word from Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk where we find that Avram is referred to as the Navon. Navon is a person who has insight. A Chacham is a person who has knowledge. You may have knowledge, but to see beyond the pale, to see beyond the veil, you have to have a certain degree of insight to penetrate and to see beyond and understand. We find that Avram is referred to as Navon. Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Moshe are referred to as Chachamim. What does that mean? Avram Avinu looked at creation, looked at this unlimited world. He was so overwhelmingly impressed. The first thing he said, who's the master of this universe? And due to his analysis and quest of truth, he came upon God. That level of inquisitiveness and drive for truth, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Moshe did not have. It's only once Yaakov, Avram Avinu, established that absolute, which is God, and whatever he provided, they took that and took it to another level. They are the Chachomim. They took the knowledge and they applied the knowledge. But the additional insight, the initial insight, only Avram had that ability. So if Avram wouldn't have begun and create that peak hole to look through, then you would have not known what you should be attracted to. So therefore, it's Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But ultimately, what do we conclude, which indicates where did it all begin? Mogen Avram. Because if not Avram, there wouldn't have been a Yitzchak, there wouldn't have been a Yaakov. And there wouldn't have been a Moshe. So therefore, we conclude Mogen Avram, although he provided protection for all of them, it was only because it all started with Avram. And to say it even more so, as we speak about Schus Avos for ourselves, even Yitzchak and Yaakov had Schus Avos from Avram Avinu. Because Avram Avinu withstood the 10 tests. Therefore, all these opportunities, spiritual opportunities, were made available to Yitzchak and to Yaakov. Only because of Avram's sacrifice and willing to give it all up. And that's why he met all those 10 tests. We don't find Yitzchak had 10 tests. We don't find Yaakov had 10 tests. But the all-encompassing patriarch, as we said, what does 10 represent? 10 represents the 10 utterances through which the world came into existence. To be able to address the objective, which is the 10 commandments, which is Sinai, Avram was challenged with 10 tests. Once he met that everything is a continuum from there. Therefore, it's Mogen Avram. It's not Mogen Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov for that reason. I mentioned yesterday that the first paragraph of the Shema is speaking about a certain segment of the Jewish people, which you could count on one hand. Not only do they love God to the point that willing to give up their lives and dedicate it fully with their hearts, but they're willing to give up every amenity that accommodates a person's needs. Meaning, these people, because of their level, they're not vulnerable. They don't have the vulnerability to the evil inclination where, as they said, each man has his price. There's no price you could actually seduce these people. The second paragraph, which we spoke, is in the plural. And the only thing mentioned is what? These people are willing to love, to do the mitzvahs with all their hearts and with all their souls. But there's no mention that they're willing to do it with all their possessions, meaning to give up all the amenities. That means you want to have something for yourself. The moment you want something for yourself, that means because you feel you have a sense of entitlement. So the evil inclination could convince you you're even entitled, ultimately, even to serve idolatry if you choose to do so. Even that. But Chofetz Chaim writes, and he wrote this in the late 1800s, where what was the Ivory Coast? Jews from Lithuania and Russia, I mentioned the other day, they would leave their families and they would travel to South Africa. South Africa in the late 1800s and the early part of the 20th century, literally, you could shovel gold in the streets. Between ivory and diamonds and what was very expensive, which was a tremendous commodity, were ostrich feathers. South Africa had ostriches. The ostrich is a desert bird. And because in those years, women's very exclusive hats were made out of ostrich feathers. So those were the three things. People would go there and they'd come back with tremendous wealth. They'd stay there a year, 2, 3 years, tremendous wealth. Firstly, whoever went there, very rarely did they come back as they came initially. That Judaism was winnowed down to a point, it was cut to the bone. To be able to interact with the Gentile, you had to accept his hospitality. You had to eat his kosher, not kosher food. You had to drink his wine. You had to violate the Shabbos, because otherwise, how do you make a fortune? Well, you don't. What did I come for? So people somehow exposing themselves to certain situations, they succumbed to those levels of temptation. And they somehow justified it. How do you justify it? Why do you go there? Knowing the cost factor and the chance and the risk you're taking, that you may compromise your Judaism, why are you going there? The people of the first paragraph of the Shema, regardless of what kind of opportunity is there, that person's not going there. Because he lives totally for God, he doesn't live for himself. People of the second paragraph, they're willing to do the mitzvahs and serve God with all their hearts and with all their lives, but not with their comforts or their possessions. Those people, they're not willing to give that up. That's a financial opportunity. It'll allow us to live at a different level of comfort, to be able to do different things which you couldn't do without that kind of wealth. So if you deal with those kinds of people, even the decision to go there could be the death wish. It's over. You go there, you're gone. Many years ago, it was a very observant family, and they had a son, and he was single. And they sent him to the Far East, which they owned a factory there, which produced telephones. They owned it. And the son was single. A single man in his early 20s with no support system. and you have all these Oriental women around you, and a human being has a need of companionship. First, it starts with socializing, spending a little time. It's inevitable he's going to be involved with this non-Jewish clientele, with these Oriental women. Ultimately, he got involved with an Oriental person, woman. He converted her, but it was disastrous. What do you think she converted? She converted why? Because he was a wealthy man. They had nothing in common at any level. They ended in divorce. But how do you send a son without a support system to such a location where it's inevitable you push him off the cliff? If you drop a person in the middle of the ocean, he could be Mark Spitz with 6 gold medals around his neck at the time. He's drowning in the middle of the Atlantic. Because even the Olympic swimmer is not going to be able to swim that distance with all the currents and everything else there. And if you have shark-infested waters, it's not survivable. So how do you send your son there? It probably won't happen, but it could happen. And it's more than probably not. It's inevitable it will. It's even more than inevitable. How do you do it? Because you know what it means to have that factory, and the only one I could trust is my son, and he'll run it. It's worth everything in the world. So for the sake of the holy dollar, a person's agreeable to delude himself and hoodwink himself and convince himself that this is going to be okay. The first paragraph of the Shema, that person couldn't be convinced under any circumstance. He would not go near it. The second paragraph, as they say, every man has his price. If the temptation and the opportunity is attractive enough, somehow we play mind games on ourselves. Tell you a story. Many years ago, there was a certain person, part of the Yad Avram group. He was a managing director in a Wall Street firm, financial firm. And his firm was bought by Sandy Weil. Story goes back 25, 30 years ago. So the head of the company then, or the person was his senior in the company, calls this person. And this person was, until he met me, or he was traditional, became observant, learned, and he gets the call from this person and says to him, we're going to meet the new chairman board Saturday night. We're having a working session all throughout Saturday with seminars and speakers. I want you to be there, and you better be there. Because he knew, he's an observant Jew, he's not coming. He says, you better be there. When he said to him, you better be there, this person's blood started to boil. You mean you tell me how I should live my life as a Jew? Who are you to dictate to me that I should be or I should not be there? That's my decision. Okay? So he was very perturbed by this directive which he received from the senior person. He immediately calls somebody who was an observant Jew that was part of the in-house legal department of this firm. And he says to him, I want to tell you the call I received, but I'm telling you, I'm not going in any circumstance. Any circumstance. I want to tell you, I don't think it's a good idea you should go. Why? Because even though we could work it out, that we'll listen to the seminars, we'll have somebody else take notes, and we don't have to violate Shabbos. But once they know that we came on our Sabbath to be part of a working session, what happens if next time we have to travel? Do they know what's permitted, what's not permitted on the Sabbath? So you're opening a can of worms here. You're creating a problem for the future. So we have to go on record. We don't work on Shabbos. They don't understand what is work, what's not work. He says, I want to tell you, whether you go or not, I don't know, but I'm not going in any circumstance because I don't want to be open for a problem in the future. Although this is permitted, we could work it out. So the person who was older than him, who's the head of the legal department of this firm, says, do me a favor. I'm an observer. Let me make the first call that I'm not going. And after you make your call, I'll make my call. Neither of them went. In the meantime, this person wrote a letter to Sandy Weil, explaining to him why he was not at the working session. And also, he's requesting kosher food at this welcoming banquet to welcome the new chairman of the board, Sandy Weil. So what happens? He gets a letter from Sandy Weil. I'm proud of you that your religion comes before your job and that you ask for kosher food rather than anything else. I'm proud to have such an employee as you are. That's what he wrote him. So when he shared the story with me, this person, I said, I'm proud of you. Why? Because if it would have been a person who had a yeshiva background education and his job he felt may be in jeopardy, knowing so much within the legal system, he'd work it out. He'd say, it's okay, we could go. He would never take into account, but you're opening a can of worms because next time you never know because they don't understand what it means, what's permitted, what's not permitted. Last time you came, why can't you come this time? Although you have to travel and we have to go on a yacht and have a company, whatever it is, or we have to travel in whatever it is. They don't understand. He only took this all into account because his religion had greater value to him than whatever that job was worth. He sacrificed for it. He's not giving it up for anything. The other person who's brought up in it, grew in it, he doesn't have the same appreciation. Although he's more knowledgeable and he knows the ins and outs and he knows all the so-called loopholes, doesn't make a difference. I said to him, I'm telling you, I'm really proud of you. Of who you are, because you can't be bought for money when it comes to your religion. Your religion is first and foremost. That's what I shared with him. That's my response to him. The first paragraph of the Shema, we're talking about that kind of person. The first bracha of the Amidah, we'll see, really corresponds to that kind of person. Speaking about who is God, and we appreciate who God is. As we said, Melech Ozer Moshe Magen, he's the king. A king is a king if he has subjects. It means these people, they subjugate themselves. They subordinate themselves to his will, regardless of the cost factor to them on a personal level. We're here to serve you. We're not self-serving, we're selflessly serving. That's what we are. The second paragraph, we're going to see the second bracha in the Amidah corresponds to the second paragraph of the Shema. We're talking about what God provides. He provides you with indiscriminate kindness. He resurrects you. He heals you. He supports you. He does this for you. We're talking about what he does for us. The first paragraph, we're not talking about what he does for us, other than remembering the kindness of the patriarchs. Therefore, he gives us opportunity and he doesn't pull the plug on us. And only when does he finally bring it to an end? When he realizes there's no hope into the future. That's when he brings Mashiach. That's when maybe Goel of Navon for the sake of his name with love. Now we want to acknowledge who he is. It's very interesting. Ato Gibor Leolam Hashem. You are powerful forever. Your power doesn't wane. God is absolute in every aspect of what he is. Ato Gibor. Leolam. What is the appellation in the Siddur? Adni. Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Master. The appellation we're expressing is not Yud Kei Vav Kei, to indicate God being infinite. You are absolutely powerful. You are the master. And how do you express and demonstrate that mastership? Machayim Mesim. You resurrect the dead. You are the one who resurrects the dead. Nobody else can resurrect the dead. It's turned to dust. Or even the body, once the soul leaves it, person is no longer alive. How do you bring the person back from the dead? Only God can. But what about if the body's reduced to dust? It decomposes. Because we find stories in the Talmud where even Amoroim, they resurrected the dead. Famous story on Purim. Rabbi and Rab Zera, two rabbis of the Talmud, they were in the middle of having a Purim feast, and one drinks, and there was a disagreement. Come Rabbi v'shachan le Rab Zera. Rabbi went and killed Rab Zera in the state of intoxication. When he realized what happened, it says he resurrected him. He brought him back to life. Talmud tells us Rav Kahana passed away due to Rabbi Yochanan, who was the leading Torah sage in Israel after the destruction of the Second Temple. When he realized why he took his life, why he passed away, he went to the cave where he was buried and he resurrected him. But there the resurrection is, the body's intact, it's only reinfusing the soul in the body. What about a person decomposes to dust? There is no body. So even if you can bring the soul back, the soul is intact. You bring back to what? It's like reformation of what the person was originally. How do you do that? That's beyond magic. That's almost ex nihilo. How do you do that? Ato Gibor. Hashem, master. You are the master. And how do you express and demonstrate that mastership? Because you're able to resurrect the dead, bring back the dead. Rav lo Shia, in abundance, you bring salvation. In abundance. This is like beyond the pale. That he recreates the person for the sake of reward. That he should be a beneficiary of all his good deeds that he had chosen during his lifetime. That's Rav lo Shia. It's not only he comes in a state to bring about salvation. He's Rav. It's an abundance. It's something unfathomable, what he does. There's a story, we'll end with this, in the end of Tractate Sanhedrin, Chelik, where the emperor says to one of the great rabbis of the Talmud, this resurrection, how's it possible? I don't get it. How's it possible that the person doesn't exist now? He does exist. To resurrect him from the dead. So he says to the daughter of the emperor, says to the rabbi, excuse me, Rabbi, let me answer my father. I would like to answer my father. Because I think the answer is simple. When a child is conceived, what do we start with? A colorless liquid, an excretion from the man's body with an ovum, and over time, we have a human being. And that human being, when that human being is born, it's a small, helpless infant. This develops into a full human being. That's not miraculous. How does that happen? The answer is because God willed that should be a natural process of existence. Fertilization, conception, life, gestation, birth. So why are you so amazed? God says that whatever trace of past exists, he reconstructs it. He wills it should come about again. What's so difficult to understand? This is the daughter of the emperor saying to her father, Father, it's not so difficult to put your hands around it or put your head around it. But that's gvura, that's power. God is master whose power, that's a demonstration of his power, of his ability.